Welcome to Penny Bradley, Nachtwaffen Pilot Presents, and today I am presenting my friend and colleague, Karen Christine Patrick, and she is a well-known speaker in the community at conferences and has several books that she has written and or edited. And she is SSP ground crew and a ET experiencer and ongoing contactee.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. I'm really excited you
Yeah,
joined
this
us.
is I'm glad to be here.
Karen was on the same team that Michael Lee Hill was on, and working with AR Bordon. And if you wanted to talk about that first, and we can
Sure.
go there.
Well, I have a whole personal AR Borden like saga, but okay. I'll cut to the chase. So prior to hooking up with the Bordenites, so I call it the latter day Bordenites, because there was the life physics group and then there was our group, which was later than that. I was already, as a contactee, getting a lot of information, but no validation of what I was getting exactly. So I look at my contact with AR Borden was validation, including being an Anunnaki contactee, as well as the information I was getting. And so that's why I got very excited about being involved, because it was like, here was a human being, right, that I could interact with in the group, that I could interact with to find out if you know, I call myself a conspiracy analyst, or an analyst of this, because it's not that I just get the information. I want to make sure I've found it in a couple of other disparate places. That was just so I would trust myself more, right? Yeah. Now that I have more trust in what I'm getting, because when I, as we both have a common background, if you have a sensitivity, you're rendered as you're insane, right? So
not just insane, but potentially possessed.
Exactly. Well, yeah. So it's kind of a thing where I had to kind of acclimate myself to that I could do this, that I had these skills and abilities, and that the information I was plugging into was, accurate. And what was it about? Trying to get details, because then you get really hungry for other people. And finding Penny Bradley is another big moment in my life because of our common background. And I will always cherish our big chit chats at Contact in the Desert with notables kind of rubbernecking to what are they talking about, but we were way over their heads.
I managed to annoy a lot of notables at that particular conference. One of them
I was annoyed too.
One of them at least has mentioned me in his own videos, not by name, but by description. He said,
"Oh yeah, sometimes you're being described."
Yeah,
well, some people are blah.
When he talks about a woman stepping up to his table and saying, "I was on Mars," he's talking about me.
Yeah, there's not too many women who are saying that, right?
Well, there are, but they're not public. They're keeping it in private groups, and they waffle back and forth between whether it was real or dreams. Like you were saying, if you don't have verification outside yourself, that external verification matters, because so many of us come from fundamentalist Christian backgrounds where those things are not acceptable. If you're hearing voices, you're schizophrenic. If you're seeing a semi-physical being in front of you, or contact in your mind, most people assume that you're hallucinating. And whenever these things become all the time. You have to deal with, is this real or am I mentally ill? And that external verification makes a world of difference.
Truly.
So
Truly it does.
for both of us, that was that, at least for me, meeting you real world and sitting there. And during this conference, well, at that conference, I was a volunteer, so I was working a lot. And when I was in between stuff, I would come hunt you down. And
I was stuck. I was at a table and I couldn't leave, so that worked out. I
that
was a
worked out.
captive audience.
That, yeah, it was, for me, it was like, oh my God, another woman in this field, because at that point I hadn't met any others. And you know, that same day I met you and Janet Lesson, and it was like,
It was
wow,
awesome.
it was awesome, yes. And
Sisters in the service.
yes, and yeah, for folks who are in the audience, my SSP memories were activated along with my Anuna awareness. I guess that's the proper term for those of us who have Anunnaki interactions. So, yeah, when I woke up, it all woke up. I've mentioned before that my paranormal stuff came first.
Oh.
So,
yeah, me too. Me too.
yeah.
I don't think you're ready for the other unless you have that as valid, as a valid informational way to go to start validating.
So what year did you start having the interactions?
Okay, that's a good question because it depends on.
I'm trying to compare notes to when I did.
Yeah, it's tough. So I think the interactions have been lifelong. I think I probably began a conversation with somebody as early as I can remember. An incident at the age of 4, and a really serious set of incidences at the age of 5, which were really important because I was accessed by Project Talent, Project Monarch, MK Ultra at the age of 7, because they were trying to recruit me already at that point. So it was a good thing that someone was beginning to interact with me, but I would, being fundamentalist, raised fundamentalist, I would have accrued that to God, maybe. Although in our branch of that you don't talk to God except through the Bible, so that would have been like unusual even as a belief system for me personally, but it was undeniable. I was being told things and shown things and helped that early on. And I would not have recognized them as that until I got sort of mentally and belief system ready, you know. But I had paranormal experiences my whole life. Typically contact based, typically one of the clairs, but it's remote knowing. But I would call it the knowing, just the knowing. I would know stuff, and that seemed to be running in my mother's family. We called it our Irish is happening, you know. Our Irish is up to date. And the funny
that was in my mother's family too, and we called it Indian.
Well, I had that too. I have both. I have a Native American, but my family identified. I mean, my family identification is through my mother's family, not so much through my dad, who was more the Indian, more the Cherokee. Although I had a Native American great 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 grandmother, but so funny stories with them was there was grandma, and she kept marrying soldiers and they kept dying. So she had these 3 daughters by 3 different dads, right? And then the 3 sisters, even though they had different dads, they were kind of synced up and grew up together. And the funny one of my favorite stories was at Christmas time. like before there was Walmart and you always have the same wrapping paper anyway for Christmas, they always pick the same wrapping paper in like Penny's and Woolworths and Sears, but they'd still get the same wrapping paper. It was and my mom was one of those people, you hand her a present, she knows what it was. So it was just there.
My mom was like that too.
And they would think about, say, hey, I wonder what so-and-so's doing, and the phone would ring. So it was a lot of that kind of stuff. I think because they had come out of Irish Catholic, and then they were Irish Protestant, Protestant Christian after that. They were kind of like pushing that away, though. It was kind of like a happenstance realization rather than me, who is, I'm going to find out why I'm doing this or how it's done. You know, I had to finally know. And I had to know, because if I was going to admit that that was not just a part of my life, but a really big part of my life, then I was going to need to know what the mechanism and process is. And fortunately, it's kind of like the instructions that come with the ability. Be careful what you ask for, you'll find out. So part of my appreciation
I've had that too.
Right. Part of my appreciation of finding AR Borden's life physics group writings was they have some terminology that was actually helpful to put a term on what the abilities are, different from the normal, you know, older stuff like clairaudient, clairvoyant, clairvoyant, like all the clairs. I do declare, yeah. They had a different terminology that suited my kind. Okay, if anyone knows me, they know I'm a total nerd. I worked in the computer for 20 years. I'm a nerd, so it fit my nerd headspace to use terminology like that because it's accurate. It actually helps me understand.
Yeah, well-defined terms are always useful.
Oh, yeah.
And my background, I was pre-med microbiology and chemistry whenever that I was diagnosed with lupus and kicked out of school.
Oh, kicked out. That's awful.
It was just before the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I had caught a virus in a biology lab I was working in, and the school thought I was a financial liability, that I was going to sue them. And so it was a cover thine ass thing.
Is that the 11th commandment? Cover thine ass.
Pretty much. So yeah. And about 2 years later, I had my third child and had a stroke in labor. So I had to learn how to talk all over again. That's why in some of my videos, I will just stop and obviously search for words. It's called aphasia. And
my daughter has that.
It's a long-term effect of the stroke. When I'm tired, it's worse. So I try to schedule these at a time of day when I'm actually not in that bad of shape.
Yeah, my daughter was born with multiple disabilities, and she had surgery, and she had a stroke during the surgery. And same thing, took her about a year to learn to talk. She's about 9 years old. She's doing. She won't stop talking now, so we're good.
I keep
but same thing. She'll try to say something. Yeah, you can. It's the looking for the term, or when you ask her a question, you have to have about 3 extra beats wait time.
Yeah,
and then
I have,
you know,
if it's like second grade English, you know, like little kids, I can talk for hours. If you want technical terms, I sometimes have to search for them. They're there.
Well, I think everybody does, right? It's not like we use them every day.
Yeah.
We don't use technical terms like the Germans as their words, right? They describe it so in detail as a technical word, right?
Yeah. That's something else about my space memories. My memories are in German, so I have to translate those. And so I'm having to remember the German term and translate it into English, and then translate it into proper English. So it sometimes takes a little bit. But yeah, I have more visual memory now than verbal. So
that makes sense. So you have to, almost like describing a video, like you're doing a commentary on a video kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what talking has become for me, is I'm describing the video that's playing in my head. And
Oh, okay.
that process gets interrupted by my my ongoing interaction with ETs and interdimensionals, and I have more than one race of ET that I interact with. So
Yeah, me too. All the time, and they're constantly like doing this. I've kind of pushed them away because it's like I can't put survival right now in with them, and with all the empathy problems that, just literally a year before all of this happened, I realized I had to take an empathy break, or a telepathy break, because it was just kind of building. And then when you add my human track lifestyle as a caregiver, so I know it's going to be in that arena, because I mean, a pandemic is a germ plus crappy healthcare. Okay, so it's like it's not just the germ,
and scared people that are being irrational.
right? So it's that when you combine all that together, it's kind of like, oh my god, I'm just face palming like this all the time. So
Well,
and
I had that shoulder injury last summer,
yeah,
and I pretty much stopped doing counseling with that because I was in so much pain of my own that I couldn't be there for others.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
having health challenges too. And it's like, that's the other thing about an empathic person. You kind of have to put your horse blinders on and deal with yourself.
Yeah.
Self-care is always a challenge, anyway, in that arena, or in that programming, I should say. So I was like right there. And then it's like, okay, add the pandemic. Why not? It's all the same.
Yeah. So people that have been contacting me for counseling, I've been generally referring them to others because I
Me
just
too.
haven't been up to it. So,
Mm-hmm.
because, and then the pandemic on top of it, because of my health issues, my doctor started me quarantine the last week of February. So I was doing fine until everyone else was quarantined. And
Uh,
they went completely batshit.
that's it's a panic-demic.
Yeah, that's what
Panic-demic,
it
right?
is a panic demic.
Yeah.
You have the people who are susceptible to it and know it, and they're terrified. And then you've got the people that don't think they're susceptible or don't think it's a real bug, and they're angry that they're being quarantined. And the combo is I've got like not quite 800 people on my wall, and they're just about evenly split between scared of the bug and angry about the bug. And they're at each other all the time. And
Oh, I
both
know.
sides have gotten nasty with me. And I'm like, I was told to quarantine myself. I did. I haven't told anybody else what to do. You know, chill.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So as things go, they dropped my doctor at the beginning of 2020 on my insurance plan and didn't tell me. So I was
Oh shit.
having re-scrambling, trying to right at the beginning of January, trying to find a new situation, and also a new pharmacy, because I wanted to go through the drive-through pharmacy, because I'm like you, I'm keeping it safe. And so I found out, don't do those two things under planned healthcare, to change your doctor and change your pharmacy, and a pandemic, and why not? There's kind of a point of craziness. Might as well pile on more. Okay, we'll deal with all of those things, because it's just it's people are who they are, situations are what they are, and all of us have to pay attention to how we live, and yes, everyone's blowing out. There's been free floating anger, man, for months and months and months, kind of
Hmm.
percolating anyway in my groups. And this is just, it's not free floating anymore.
Now, the group that you're in is based on the writings of AR Borden, right?
Yeah, I actually started it because what I began to realize, we've had everyone who interacted with AR Borden got a lot of files, but we all got a different set of files, you know, because
Ah,
he kind of just threw them out whoever, whenever. So that's part of why I started the writings of AR Borden, was I wanted to have sort of one place where we could all, well, I had intention to discuss, but I went into my like emotional cave right about, you know, it's been a while. So I was very, very exhausted 2 years ago. The contact in the desert about is when I'm pooping out, because that previous 5 years was all lunar anomaly stuff and our AR Borden stuff together. And it was insane because, you know, as we were talking out before, when you're trying to validate, and it's kind of like drilling for oil, and then you hit the mother lode and it just goes crazy. So I wasn't going to squander the opportunity to learn everything I could from any kind of information flow that made itself known, but it was kind of like, you know, too much. So I got to have time to be a human and sort it out and all those things. And I have my own contact base. So it's kind of like, okay, yes, I know those things, but now I'm going to go check with my multiple level of contact bases, anywhere from soul groups to ETs to some mechanicals to reptilians to, I mean, I had to narrow them down because there were, when I opened, well, going to go back to being 5 or 6 or 7 years old when they were recruiting me for the gnosive programs through Project Talent, and I kind of have to, like you, with a
you
history
need
lesson.
to define the term gnosic programs, because that's something that my audience won't know about.
Okay, so a gnosive, being a gnosive, a remote knower. It's similar to the word Gnostic, but it's a knower. It's a person who just knows stuff. They may hear it, they may see it, but it's kind of like the early internet before we had internet. Gee, I wonder about that thing, and boom. You know, even family stuff, so I had to be really careful what I said. I learned that I was freaking out the grown-ups very young because I would just blurt this stuff out and they'd be all upset. And I go, why are they upset? And it's like, so I got really quiet starting about the age of 5 or 6. I don't want to freak out the grown-ups, or the normie grown-ups, I should say, because that's even another level. So obviously humans are generally a little bit more telepathic than we're told.
Mm-hmm.
But some of us are, you know, like a gifted
Talented.
musician. Yeah, they just got it in spades. Now, to kind of backtrack where that term came from, is that, so my human history starts with the Cold War, basically. We had the end of World War II. I'm just watching that World War II thing right now. You know, we're all streaming stuff. And so it's kind of interesting to watch the intrigue and then the intelligence that was going on at that time. And then after the war, we go into this Cold War because they didn't want to go into shooting war with the USSR. So we got the Nazi paperclip scientists is where this starts. They weren't just rocket scientists or chemical warfare scientists. They were also were involved in the nascent space programs, overt and covert, because I get it that there was an overt and covert component. And some of them went to
I was in the
Russia, and
covert component.
yeah, right. Well, this is knowable in the overt one too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's even a lady who just published a book about Project Paperclip. So you can get the gist of the overt aspects. But they took, they split up the scientists, and some of them went to Russia and became their program. Now they immediately started using the ones that were experimenting with telepathy and psychic warfare and ESP and all of that. Then the ones that came to the United States is still quite puritanical, so that suppression because of religion kind of kept them from having that develop as quickly, the
Mm-hmm.
ESP remote viewing type of stuff. But once they realized the Russians were ahead of them, of course, then we had sort of a psychic space race, basically. And so they started, one of the things they found out the Russians were doing was recruitment they were trying to test children. They needed to test children because children haven't been inoculated against, you know, they don't know what the world's supposed to be like. They don't know what they're supposed to think, right? They realized they needed to catch the talent early And so they had Project Talent, which was, if you look, you can look it up. It's basically trying to find gifted children. So this became the Gifted and Talented program, trying to find children that had abilities, right? But they were looking for really smart, had mathematical abilities or science or whatever, and track them towards college sooner. But the underlying covert aspect was they were trying to find psychic children. They wanted psychic, they wanted compliant. That was what I've been told by other people that were in the program. And then they began to use them still as children, you know, through the Gifted and Talented programs, and began training and recruitment. And I was involved in that recruitment, and it took me a while to remember all of it because I was put under hypnosis multiple times to keep remembering, and or blank slate technology, which is all another thing. But they didn't know how to handle me because I wasn't particularly compliant. I was not going to just, oh yeah, you want me to do that thing, I'll do it. I was like, why do you want me to do that? Just asking that question put me into less compliant mode. And there was I can't explain it, but like a divine intervention, and that's a whole story. But basically I was taken out of those programs. And that was not just a, well, I'm not cooperating thing. That was done, I think, by my ET friends, the benevolent ones, because they were going to kill me. I mean, if you find somebody who was in those programs at our age who doesn't know people who died, it's unusual, because it was brutal. They put us in adult situations, combat. Some of the testing was quite, you know, of course, you know, the abuse. They were trying to, so to make a proper note, and that's what a gnosive is somebody who knows.
To activate psionic abilities, they put you in death situations. In my program, we had a regen tank. So they would actually kill us and then regenerate us and bring us back, with the inevitable conclusion that death was not an option, which was a way of forcing compliance. You might as well comply, because even if you die, you're still going to have to do it.
I don't retain those memories completely, but there is you know, there's a shadow of a memory, if that makes sense, of it. So I think I've been through it.
Yeah, well, I'm a generation older than you are. Because
yeah, that's why I loved hooking up with you, because I know they did that to the kids born in the early 60s. You were a validation that it was starting in the 50s, which was kind of helped with the timeline of me trying to understand it. That was like, oh, it was sooner than that.
Yeah, it was, this was, America lost World War II with the Battle of Operation High Jump in 1947. And there was a whole restructuring of the Defense Department and spy agencies at that point. And I know America signed some sort of peace treaty with Japan at that point, and they waited until 1953 to sign the one with the Germans in Antarctica. And so in between 1947 and 1953, you have the Office of Strategic Services was disbanded and replaced with the CIA and the NSA. And the CIA was predominantly Nazi SS from the Gestapo, and some were from the Stasi by 53. And the Stasi was East Germany. And the NSA was calling itself none such agency up until 2000. So, yeah, it was like nobody admitted it was real, but everybody knew it was. It was like this running joke. Oh yeah, that's none such agency. There were even TV shows about none such agency. They called it national security. You know, they didn't say National Security Administration. They just said Oh, well, he's a national security guy. So, none such. And
Right.
by 2010, when I was first becoming political on social media, um, I had not even been on social media until 2008. But in 2010, I started becoming political on social media. And within the first 6 months, I had a handful of agents from various agencies, some CIA, some NSA, some FBI, some from other countries. Um, and they were all, because I had political pages, they were on my pages, they came to my wall. In those days, I was stupid and everything was public. You live and
I
learn.
consider it probably anyway, I mean, how the back door, what I know from the technology, and I didn't finish college because they made me sick. I almost died of a virus. Imagine that. Um, and
That was
I
basically what happened to me.
yeah, I was given well, it was I had a friend who had a mutated form of another virus, and but he was like typhoid Mary. He didn't know he had it, and decided to
Mm,
go on a road trip. And man, there was bodies dropping all along the way. The CDC chased him down and put him in quarantine until they thought he was safe. But in the meantime, I was in that like disease cluster, so I know what's coming next. The contact tracing part
mm,
is it's already a part, and a lot of people are freaking out about contact tracing, and I'm going, well, that is how you, when the thing mutates and crops back up again later, that's how you're going to get ahead of it. So I don't know what to say about
yeah.
that. That's how it's done. But yeah, so I didn't finish school because I just was too ill, um but I got far enough in it to take computer courses. And one of the computer courses, I was straight up told by, I think, insider guy, that they recruited to be a professor, that they just simply, everything's going to have a backdoor, and they're not going to give us the level of encryption for us to prevent that, because they want that access. So that's why we have all these security problems with our banks and
Mhm.
hacks and everything else. Was they designed it in mind with that they have to have a back door. And most of the 3-letter agency operatives that have to do that are kind of dumb on technology, so it has to be a kind of a dumb level. It has to be a lower level, so it just
That's
pay
that's
well, that's what
because
he said.
that's because 3-letter agencies are not allowed to let them smoke pot on the job, and they make more money with Google and Facebook.
I know. So he said, yeah, that means that it's going to be a dumb backdoor, so that the hackers of the world unite. We just gave you a door to go into. But then
Well,
they just hire
I've
them.
always figured that anything that was on the open internet
Mhm.
was being tracked. I changed ISPs last December because I was with AT&T, and they were turning me off from 2 to 18 hours a day every day.
Ah,
But when I was online, I was on the fiber optic cable that was reserved for the federal government. And it's like, my ISP is plugged into CIA Central. Yeah, they don't
make
even
it
have,
easy.
it doesn't matter. I changed companies to a satellite version where they're probably still getting it, but I have the delusion that
Oh
they
yeah.
have to work a little harder.
I I just assume all the time, no matter what I say or do, um, you know, every step you take, they'll be watching you. Yeah,
Yeah,
eye in the sky. And
yeah.
that's okay. I come to terms with it in the sense that I had a lot of interference, and I pretty much give a block of you may watch, but you cannot interfere. You know, you may observe, but you cannot interfere. I've had them where I've heard them clear their throats because they didn't hit their mute button. I mean, so I'm just like, I hope you're learning something. So today they're in school learning from the school marms today. What we're talking about.
Yeah.
Listen and learn, right?
Those of us who are truly psychic, have the psi abilities, we know there is no real privacy.
Of course not.
You know,
No.
there is no real privacy. If you have telepathy, you can block people from going deep into you, but you can't even block a front door conversation.
Not
You
really.
know, people just trip me out because it's, well, how do I stop a remote viewer? You don't. You can't.
I tell you what, though, if you say hi, it freaks them out.
It does. It does. It does.
What you doing in there? What's going
I
on?
see you.
Oh, I've seen them in their cubicles and everything else, and I'll go, hey, what's happening? Or I'll just watch them for a while till they begin to realize that they think they're blanked, they're blocked, and to most people they probably would be, but not me. So I'm in their space. I'm looking around. You know, I basically, the type of remote viewing I was taught was like a little tiny drone camera being in the space in a 3D 360-degree way. So I'm looking around at their dirty desk. I'm looking at, you know, what's going on and what they look like, and you know. I go outside of them and look at them. You know, it usually gets their attention. Like I'm looking through their eyes initially. By the way, that's kind of my first link up. Which it's funny because that is the thing that I experienced the most that I had no explanation for, and I didn't realize that I did that. But part of why I did that was when I was about 3 years old, I developed an eye condition, and it caused extreme astigmatism, so I couldn't see very well. But I just did that. I switched to looking out of people's eyes. And my dad was reading me the little storybooks, you know, the Cat in the Hat and the whole thing. And I'm like reading the book through his eyes because I can't see the book. And they don't understand that as soon as I got glasses, I could read. Just like that. Because I've been reading the books, right? And I didn't even think about that until much, much later because, you know, once I could look through my own eyes, I wasn't doing it anymore. But I do. I definitely do that more. And I have to kind of be careful because there's not privacy, but there is courtesy. You know, it's like you kind of don't just click in there and do that. You know,
normals have the delusion that they have privacy inside their own heads, and if you have to live around normals, like most of us do, you have to give the courtesy of trying to preserve their delusion.
Yes.
Otherwise, they get scared, they get panicky, and then they attack you. And that's not fun.
Right. So I'm beginning to learn that at the age of 5 or 6 years old to let them think how they please. But I mean, that was a real obvious ability of me. So I did sort of ping on the, you know, list of things that they're testing for with these kids. And I remember there was this, my parents got nervous. Well, they were fundamentalist and like far right politically.
Don't those go together?
I don't know. It's just I call it angry politics and angry religion, but yeah. They got nervous about something was going on at the public school and they couldn't quite put their finger on it. And so the decision was made to put me into a parochial school, which, believe it or not, was an improvement. We wouldn't think it was, but at least they weren't doing all that stuff. But at the time that it was going on, like it became a cat and mouse because I start figuring out, because my parents are constantly talking about government at the end, the groups they were in talking about how the government was monitoring everybody and trying to control everybody, and it was very conspiratorial. So I'm like onto them recruiting me. So I'm kind of like, yeah, you're doing this, aren't you? I mean, I didn't know what recruitment was, the word, but I knew you guys are interested in me, and I'm going to be interested in you being interested in me. And that's been a good tool. Like, oh,
Yeah,
I'm interesting. Why am I interesting? So I'm the why girl. I've been voted
I've
at
been a
work.
why girl.
The person, the person is most likely to say why or ask questions in
Everybody has a primary question that they ask. My first husband was a when person. Anytime you said, well, you did such and such, when? That was
yeah.
his question, was when, when. Mine is why.
Me too.
Because if I can understand the why, I can usually figure out how to deal with the behavior.
Yeah. And there's who people too. There's who did that,
Yeah,
who what why. Usually we're gossipy who people, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. The who people are usually really gossipy. And then there are people in the gossipy mode who don't seem to care about any evidence at all, that the accusation means you're guilty. And I'm finding a lot of those currently following a certain theorist out there. I don't want to
There's
give
a
them
lot
any
of them.
I don't want to give them any advertising. They're taking over too much. But a lot of people, and it's gotten worse with the pandemic, a lot of people are not using logic or rational thought. They're going with gut instincts. And much as I trust my gut, I don't let it override logic.
Yeah. And information gathering and analysis and all
And
the tools in the toolbox, right?
and the psi abilities are tools in the toolbox, but they're not all there is. I
I have to
still I
credit.
still apply logic to the psi abilities, because if what I'm picking up doesn't make sense logically, then I have to wonder about my source,
Yes.
because my experience with those people, and I use the word people loosely, is they all have an agenda. And they may not have killed us all off as a race, but at the same time, they haven't been nice to us either. I know the main race that you and I have both had contact with, they have used us as slave labor. They have used us as super soldiers in their wars. They have interbred with us without consent. They have mind controlled us so that whatever consent we gave was useless. Um, and they've continued to run our world while giving us the delusion that we were running it. So
Oh yeah.
I don't trust that race at all. And
No.
what was it that AR Borden called them? The Zha.a.mi? However, he spelled it differently in every book, but it's basically pronounced Zha.a.mi, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
There's even in that name, there's a bit of a psyop in that name that most people. I've been trying to track down the psyop of the name. So even if we're given a name or given a term, I even go to the extra step of a word study to find out where did that name come from. And so I've been working through the different names, and then I discovered the name really isn't specific to one particular race. The name, the word name Anunnaki, right? Or Anunnaki. When you go back to what the name of the word is, I don't go with Sitchin. I part with Sitchin. It's not the whatever, and I don't go with the alternatives who don't agree with Sitchin either. The word is a term. It's a term, and the language is the living language that still has where you can break the word out into a phrase. So that's how you know you've hit the right language, is does the name break out into a phrase? And it breaks out into a phrase on a minority language of Albania called Geg Albania. And I'm big in Albania, by the way. I've talked to the linguists out there. I've been on Albanian paranormal television, as a matter of fact.
Awesome.
But
Would you believe I'm big in Russia?
Yeah, I would definitely believe you're big in Russia. It means those, how the moon is us, or how not Earth. A lot of people say it's Earth. It's how the moon is us. So the Anunnaki, when they first came here, they didn't go straight onto the planet's surface. They used the moon as a base, and they've been going back and forth to the moon, and that's why there's a moon, ancient moon base to modern moon base up there called Luna, and most of the access points are on the back of the moon, with shielded access on the front. But that was the whole track I went down. Well, we're talking about having opportunities. Besides the AR Borden life physics group was his earlier group, access to the information. I also got involved with a NASA whistleblower, Ken Johnston. I think he was at the table. That was the table I was at Kodak in the Desert. And got involved.
I've talked to him at a couple of conferences, and we're still friends on Facebook. When I was permabanned last year, he was one of the people who hunted me down.
Nice to know. Well, he's an interesting guy. He's a contactee experiencer, but also he was involved in the early development of the NASA space program, and worked with contracting companies with NASA. And I was his book editor, so I got a chance to really dig down in his story. And Brett was his graphic. Brett, my partner, my wonderful, long-suffering partner, who's sitting right over there, over the top of my computer. He is
well, my partner's over
I
here.
see Lou and your cat, and I don't know if you heard dogs coming in, but yeah, we worked helping with both the graphics aspects, because he kind of did all that and never really got onto the computer thing. So we helped get a lot of his stuff online. Brett did a secondary analysis of his images and found all kinds of anomalies. Brett started with, and we worked on the Lunar Anomaly Research Society, and then I was Ken's book editor. So there's kind of that whole chapter in there too. But what I was getting from that is that that's where I got more of a ability to connect to the SST aspect. It's like, probably you've been through, your brain starts out, hey, I'm an earthling and I'm looking up there and I'm wondering what's going on, to I'm out there looking down here, or my perspective has changed from, there's a whole bunch of stuff out there, and I'm observing what's happening on Earth from a space side mentality, kind of. Because of the fact that why would you care if you were in the bathroom when the party's going on in the living room? You know what I mean? Why would you care? You want to be where the things are happening and what's going on, right? And that's what's going on.
No, I don't.
No, you don't. I'm just saying it.
I want to hide in the back bedroom where they don't even know I'm here, because
no, I know that. I know the introvert.
I've spent way too much time in the party.
Oh, no, I understand. I'm just saying, from what's going on perspective, the reality is we're in a populated solar system, populated galaxy, populated universe, and but I wanted to go back to something AR Borden said to me when he began to realize I was a contactee. And he said, take off your wow goggles. And what he meant was like, wow, you're getting this information and it's really exciting. And then you have to take off your wow goggles or your rose-colored glasses or however, and think about what you're being told, as if some random human walked up and said the thing. You'd be like, what? Yeah. Oh, there's what people too. What? What was that? What happened? What people? And that was really a good validation, because I had already been like that, but I was really excited reconnecting. And then when he said that, it's like, oh, so when I talk to these beings, they're sharing with me like anybody does. Yeah. Their prejudices, their belief systems, their agenda.
Yes.
Definitely. And that was a good tool in the toolbox, you know.
I had to figure that out for myself. And when I have shared that with people in the community, in the SSP and UFO and super soldier communities, that has been the biggest issue between me and them, is that I assume all ETs and interdimensionals have an agenda, and they want to swallow everything.
Well, and a belief system too. It's not just like I'm agenda and I have an intent to squash you. It's just that they have their perspective or their belief system that is part of their agenda, but their assumptions about things, their prejudices about things, their misinformation. They get told lies too if they're not taking their wow goggles off. I bet you people don't know that.
They probably are. And some races have a hive mind, so they're not even capable of taking it apart and thinking for themselves. So they are taking the agenda of the entire race. And I'm going to name names. Okay, the Urantia book.
Oh, don't get me started. With all due respect
the Urantia book, I know people who quote it like our denomination quoted the Bible.
Yeah.
The Urantia book is channeled from the Mantids, the Mantid Empire, the creators of the Regen tank that was used on me by the CIA and the Germans in space. They have an empire. They want to take over Earth because they think we're doing a crappy job taking care of it. Okay? This is the same group that Randy Kramer says that the Department of Defense has invited to do a hoax invasion so that the DOD can rule the world to get rid of slavery. So
that's ironic.
You have an agenda here of let's take over Earth. And so they send us a holy book. They send us tech. They have convinced the DOD that they're harmless, so they are the ones that are being invited to do the hoax invasion. And once they have the invitation, they can do a real invasion without violating galactic law.
Jeez. You know where the Urantia book lost me? Because you're going to laugh. Because the Urantia book has the little model family plan. The daddy does the daddy stuff, the mommy does the mommy stuff, and the kiddies do the kid. That's where they lost me, and you know why? Because that
was what we were raised with.
It was, yeah, and so I was like, it was like we're rubbing the cat's fur the wrong way. I was just out, you know. I was actually in a Urantia study group for just 2 sessions, and then I finally caught up reading the book, and I got to that chapter or whatever it was, and I was like,
Well, there's a guy out there who is a Urantia devotee, and now has guru status, and he actually put a curse on me in one of the groups I was in. So I will not name his name because he has enough advertising out there already.
And you and I are made of Teflon, so bring it on. We're the Teflon, whatever's, because it's like an unsticky Post-it note.
I did a return to sender spell.
Oh yeah, just no.
Easy.
Mirror it back.
Just mirror it right back. Make sure it hits him 10 times. Easy.
Yeah, they can barely take it once over.
It's his own karma. So
yeah. Just basic living in your little little mirror egg is what I have, a mirror egg. So it goes back.
Basic psionic life.
Yeah, you have to come up with.
When you live in a reality where you have no privacy and you can't block people, and people can do shit based on their aggression, and you're really trying to not be aggressive, what are you supposed to do? You just put up mirrors.
What's fascinating of our background too was because they had misinterpreted what a psychic experience is like. The programming coming from that was not only there was nothing there, you know, it was literally created for you not to put any boundaries whatsoever as a female.
Yeah.
You know, as a female, you have literally no self-autonomy at all. But
I was raised that literally that I was property, and when I was 2 years old, I was sold for 2 cows.
Basically, yeah.
No, that's the honest truth.
That happened.
Because not only was I that denomination, but I was being raised on Portuguese dairies that were run by people from the Azores, and that was the culture I was raised in.
Yeah, no doubt.
I was purchased by the boy's father for 2 cows, and that was a decent price.
Well, you know, it's because you're just so special. You're 2 cow worthy.
Well, I was blonde, and that was, these guys liked blonde.
I probably would have been traded for a goat and a hound dog, I think, maybe.
Well, when I was 16, I was in the local newspaper for scholarships. I was winning scholarships, but I was in the newspaper. So the family of the boy canceled the contract.
Wow. Because you were too uppity?
Because ladies are only in the paper when they're born, when they're married, when they have babies, and when they die. Anything else is a disgrace.
Wow. You drew attention to yourself.
I drew attention to myself, therefore I was disgraceful and not to be part of their family. So this was literally how I was raised. On top of, I had been taken for mind fracture, and then spent time in space where I was a warrior, and I come back and I'm in trouble because I still have psi abilities. I do have some programming that I can't just kill people with my mind, although if I think my life is in danger, I can. And they didn't block it entirely. They just put a firewall. And so I have all this stuff going on. If I get pissed, the electronics go out. So I try really hard to not get pissed because computers are expensive.
It's so hard right now. It's set up to piss everybody off, kind of.
Yeah, and so I'm spending less and less time online simply because I don't want to blow up. I got a brand new computer in January. I don't want to blow it up. So, oh, it's gorgeous. You got to see this.
Oh, oh, nice, sweet. That's awesome.
It's got a light show.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, see, you're a nerd girl too.
Oh,
that's
definitely.
Nerd girl stuff.
My first job out of college, my first job out of junior college, I was a computer programmer. What they today call a software engineer.
Yeah, exactly.
It was.
Yeah, I was in the first class of computer class of any of our high school at the time. The science teacher, who was my neighbor and knew me, my nerdness, even though I was mostly in music at that time, he set up a computer class, and I was one of 4 people. That was the first 4 people in that, and that was all about it.
I don't want to sound like I'm bragging.
And I was in the biz for 20 years too.
I was a national merit finalist in 1973, and I graduated with honors. I was 19th out of 257 kids. I had earned a full ride to Cornell University as an engineering student for the 3rd year that they were accepting women into their engineering school. Wow. And my father turned down that scholarship. And
I had a similar intervention. Yeah, I had a similar intervention from my dad too, so.
He flat out told me, point blank, Girls don't need degrees, girls need husbands. And I've been raising you to be a country preacher's wife.
Mm. The
So,
program that our denomination had also had the academic track, so they had the colleges, and that's where a woman was supposed to get her MRS degree, right?
yeah, I
But that was
remember
the
that.
track I was on. Yeah, I was on that track.
I was not even to be on that track because Dad
Wow.
had been to Fried Hardeman and decided that that any kind of a college was not where he wanted his daughters to be if he wasn't there to screen who they were dating.
That's I know a lot of folks like that.
And he was he was so picky. I was asked out by several boys at my high school, but they were not people that Dad would have accepted
Mm-hmm.
at all. So I dated one young man from our actual congregation, and he turned out to be gay and introduced me to Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, that's the underlying reality is that fundamentalism, all the human orientations and beliefs and of who you are and all that's there. Whether they decide to suppress it or not, it just goes underground. And um, we're still battling with can you be who you are in many circles, and I feel bad for people in that situation. And I was in that situation because I couldn't be a nerd girl. I was constantly being pushed into some form of relationship, so I picked a nerd boy and we got married and started a small computer company, and I was the office manager for a long time. And man, I went into like I was a mom, I was a homeschooling mom, I was running a company, and I did my third child was born with disabilities, so I was in for it with the whole just at home thing. So right now with all the people whose kids they're having to homeschool their kids and all, it's like welcome to my world, because that's how I lived for a long time. I don't know how I did it. I'm exhausted now. I think that's why.
Well, my kids had disabilities. They are still medication dependent.
Mm.
My oldest is 44. Um, and I could not have homeschooled them because I didn't have the patience. Uh,
Mm. I struggled. I struggled.
I kept
But
trying
because
to
I
work.
had been accessed in school, I was determined not to put them after I was accessed. That was
Okay.
my motivation that I don't think they even know. They don't even know that really. That we've never had that conversation because we're not in that conversational space. And they don't understand that my being accessed and realizing the impact on me of what that meant, because I was in parochial school from second grade till seventh grade, and the minute I got back into school, they had paired me up with a monarch kid to be my friend that I would tell everything to. I
Okay.
had not had any contact with her from the time of second grade till seventh grade, and all of a sudden she knew my address. See, so they were accessing me, and I had many access experiences all the way through from junior high on. So it's kind of like I was not a happy camper. I liked school, I liked learning, I liked all that, but I knew
Well,
that was going on. You
my
know?
parents were more abusive than school was.
Mm.
So for me, school was an escape.
Yeah, I felt that way
And
too.
I was so damaged from the programs themselves that I really didn't have that person to be sharing everything with. And I spent a lot of time hiding out in the library.
That's what I did. Well, when that
And
person came back in my life, the fact that they knew where I was at freaked me out. So I did not write her back. I think I wrote one letter and that was it. But recently I went through Brett went through all my photographs and helped me digitize them, and her picture was in there. I forgot she sent me her picture too. And I was like, I had by then developed, you know, awareness of who I should talk to and who I shouldn't. And most of the people, well, okay, by now, because I am on Facebook and I have a lot of classmates on Facebook, and they knew, you know, if you look at my senior high school thing, it says, you're very nice, but you're weird. You're very weird, but you're very nice. I mean, it just, that seems to be the consensus. They knew there was something up with me. And a few have listened to my radio shows and discovered, oh yeah, that was why, you know.
Yeah, mine all say how sweet I was. Not that I'm weird, just how sweet. And
oh, Penny, she's sweet.
yeah.
Well, I was always like running around with the Ray Bradbury book and Asimov in front of him, so that was part of it. And I started the science fiction club in high school. We sold corn dogs at the state fair to have a film festival, so it was fun.
I started the ecology club in
Oh, that's
1970.
neat. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, save the earth.
Say, I have always
You had that
been.
save the earth mentality.
I have always been who I am. I just wasn't as open about it before because I was in this fundamentalist church and my programming was to be a true believer. And in 2013, when an NSA agent activated my memories, the religion programming was gone. I can remember having faith. I still remember everything I learned even when I went to Mennonite Brethren Seminary. But I don't believe it anymore. And
there's more information to compare to. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
It's a very limited information set.
Then I had to deal with the psychic level just went way up. And I became lucid 24/7 unless I take something to make me sleep. And even then, it's like, it's very rare that I don't remember basically being on all night. If I have no memory of the night before, it means I was abducted and mind wiped.
Yeah. The aforementioned blank slate technology, BSD.
Yes. I'm taken at least 2 to 3 nights a week, every week, on an ongoing basis. There was a time frame, 2018, from November 5th to December 15th, 20th, that range, that I was taken twice a night, every night. And I know what I'm doing on those missions because I have bleed over with them. They're on.
Yeah, bleed over is a good way to put it.
It's like my consciousness can't decide which body it's in.
For a good hour while you're trying to wake up, right? It's like I wake up slow because I've got to re-inhabit.
Yeah, you have to get back in the body. And there have been times I've had appointments that I've missed because I woke up and it took me 3 hours to get back in the body. And it's like, how do you explain that to a normal? They just think you're incompetent or unprofessional. And I've gone.
I got to tell you how I know they've taken me. Is one other way. This is a manifestation both my brother and I have. Is when I wake up, I'm speaking in another language, but I don't think it's an Earth language that I know. It's not a European language or anything. And I wonder what it is, because I think it's some form of the Anunnaki language. And now in the parlance of religion, that would be speaking in tongues, right?
Yes.
But in the parlance of the religion we were in, you can't do that. It's insanity. Right.
Okay.
And so the tricky part is my brother does it and I do that.
I have a prayer language. And it was from after I had left that denomination and I was Actually, I got it while I was in that denomination at home during a private group meeting because I was a member of that group during the time that they were splitting the Pentecostals off. And
Mm-hmm.
they called them charismatics. And I was a closet charismatic. I had already learned I couldn't tell them anything. But my prayer language, no, it's not a light language. It's Drac.
Is it?
Yeah, mine is
Wow.
Drac. And yeah, it's real interesting because for years I would be singing in Drac. So yeah, um,
Yeah, that's how I kind of rediscovered it on a voluntary basis. Was the same thing. I was in charismatic after I left the other one because I was falling asleep in the pew like so many people do, and I was very frustrated by the programming and already questioning it. So I hadn't quite got out of faith mode yet. So I went through a lot of different groups, and
I
when
kept being excommunicated.
I volunteered for that. I would just go to try something else. But I was when they call it prayer language came in, what happened was because I had a belief adjustment to do to even do it at all,
Yeah.
it was happening twice. So now that's why I know it wasn't gibberish, is I would say a whole phrase and then I'd say it again. And you really can't do that if it's a long sentence. It's if it's gibberish, right?
I was doing it in Drac and then doing it in English.
Oh, I see. So you translated. Okay.
I was translating, and I was given the prayer language and the translation, and it was like, okay, well, since I no longer have faith, but I still have this running through my head because it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I shared with a friend who claims to be an incarnated Draconian, and he
Mm-hmm.
says, "You're speaking Drac, Penny."
Oh, okay,
And I
good to know.
go,
I still don't know what it is, but both my brother and I have the same one, but he doesn't believe in any of that. He's still back there on that's not a thing, but he does it in the morning. He wakes up and he's since he was a little kid just talking that way,
yeah,
and uh, I don't know. So where that comes into is I think that's where when I'm having my nighttime adventures, I think that's what I'm speaking. And I'm talking to somebody. And by the way, and oh no God, I'm waking up now. Okay, I'm still telling them something or teaching or talking, and I'm now waking up, and it just keeps going. I just kind of wake up with that, many times in the morning. Or if I don't say it, it's in my head. I'm still in the
yeah.
headspace of the
I can
language.
hear it. It's
Yeah.
ongoing. But the Alpha Draconians are one of the races I have contact with. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I was recently accused of putting them ahead of humans. And I don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I do defend them from a lot of the false accusations that are out there. Uh, to my knowledge, the Draconians have not enslaved anybody on Earth. It was the Zha.a.mi who did.
Yeah, I think the service to self and service to others and beneficial to humans and not beneficial to humans problem is a bit on the more universal side. So I
Yeah,
don't typically like to say all of this race is bad and all of this race is good, because whenever I interact with individuals in those situations, there's a mix of some
mm,
are service to others and some of us are service to self. And humans have a problem with just because we want to ignore the slavery on this planet and the mistreatment of the earth, doesn't mean that other races, you know, we might step over the homeless guy on our way to work, but that does not mean other races don't notice how we treat classes of people and children and women and animals in the earth. We might ignore it. And so
Exactly.
that's our problem, and their reaction would be as anyone who reacts to the way we look at back in the war, where they were treating the Jewish people and the Holocaust and all those. That's on my brain because I'm watching that movie. But basically, we now know about that. We didn't know about that before, but now we do. You know, shortly after the war, all of it came out, and we're like, oh, those people did that thing. And I was like, hey, who's the aggressor really? Or humans, there's a mix of humans. So just like you wouldn't say a human, any particular, is all good or all bad per se. You got to take the person on an individual basis. And when you're taking off your wow goggles, you're putting on your discernment goggles.
Exactly.
You want to have a set, whenever I hear information or I'm evaluating a person I'm in contact with, I sort of have, I call it my puzzle table. So you know how you put a jigsaw puzzle, and there's parts of it I've put together, right? And I know what that's about. And then there's the pieces that don't fit yet. And then when I'm discerning it, I'm looking at multiple resources, including, I sort of have a mental map in my head of where the information fits and where that person is mostly connected to. And that person might be a very decent human, but if they're connected to a controlling group, then I have to kind of go, well, until they break from that group, I've got to be cautious with that person.
Yeah,
And
it's being
that's,
aware of their bias.
yeah, and my bias. You can't analyze something else. I consider myself fluidly learning. So if I said something yesterday and I find out, oh, I'm off base, I'm constantly trying to do that check for myself, because that sharpens your tools for when you're trying to evaluate something not from you, you know. But I
Yeah.
think it's just fair. You know, of course I'm a human. Of course I know how I was raised. I know it's been interesting who people go, oh, so-and-so, they're mind control. And I'm go, did you learn that from the internet or TV, that that person was mind controlled? Really? You know, because you've got to discern what's on TV and what's on the internet too. And you have to have tools in the toolbox of that. It's important to have tools
Well,
in the toolbox, and you don't want just a hammer and a screwdriver. So you can bang on people and screw them, but you can't do anything else. You need more evaluation tools of a finer note. And being a computer engineering person, you know how many tools, little intricate tools come with, you know, PCs and building boards and all that. You need that variety of tools. And the more of those that you competently use, the better your information is going to be, as unencumberedly pure as possible.
okay.
And that's relative. It's a relative thing. And I know it bugs people when you say it's relative, but it kind of is. Oh, there's absolute truth. Yeah, well, okay.
There's absolute truth, but nobody has it.
That would be a really good beginning place to try to communicate or evaluate, right?
There is an absolute truth objectively, but no one has it, and everyone has a little piece of it, but it's kinked.
Oh, it's a twisted puzzle piece then. You take the puzzle piece and you go, okay, yeah.
So everybody's puzzle piece is twisted a little bit. Some of them are twisted a lot, and some of them are so twisted they're no longer usable. And so you have to get as many of the pieces in a pile as you can and start flattening them out and putting them together. And there will be pieces that are so totally unusable that whatever truth is actually in them is lost.
Yes.
And what I have found is, if you're listening to ETs, they have an agenda. All of them. All of them. And all of humanity's sky gods are Anunnaki. And for some reason, humans think that if they look like us, that they're wonderful, and if they don't look like us, they're demonic. And
There you
that,
go.
and so you got to toss all that, because my experience in SSP is that the more they look like us, the nastier they are.
Mm.
That the ones who don't look like us are more likely to give us a straight deal. So that's a bias I have from space. And I guess that's why people think that I don't like humans. Um,
Well, we're
that,
kind of
that,
work in
and
progress, right?
that, and because of my own ET past lives, and yes, I have many. From what I can tell, I have been every sentient race in this galaxy at least once, some of them more than once. So I don't feel I'm biased because I've been all of them. But at the same time, I look at humans, and I have been human for 1,000 incarnations because I'm in jail here. I was on the Zha.a.mi team that created humanity as a slave race. And when I was killed, I was condemned to live as one of my creations until I could understand why slavery was wrong.
Yeah.
That's what the Lords of Karma do. That's what happens when you die on Earth. So, my thing about humans is humanity has incredible potential. Even in our current dumbed down version, we have incredible potential. But 99% of us don't operate at our potential. We operate at survival, just what it takes to survive. And we're selfish. We won't help another person unless we get something out of it, even if it's the good feeling. And then we'll go, I helped somebody today. You know, brownie points.
Pat yourself on the back.
Yeah. You know, we have to get something out of it or we won't take care of someone else. And it doesn't even matter if that person is in our family or not. Other races understand family ties. Hell, other races understand soul family ties. Humans don't.
No.
Humans will maybe be faithful to their mate. Most of us aren't.
Yeah.
They might sacrifice themselves for their own children. We currently have a third of humanity kills their daughters for not being sons. And before people say, well, that doesn't happen here, this is what I am hearing from ET councils, why we're not given more access to the technology that the SSP has, is because they say, well, you have a third of your people are killing your daughters because they're not boys. What are they going to do with this tech?
Weaponize it. Weaponize it.
Do we want to give them this? Because everything we have is weaponized. Do the ETs want to be responsible for what can happen if we get free energy? Do they want to be responsible for what will happen if we get actual replicators that can produce anything just with programming it? Do they want to be responsible for that? You know, they've seen what we've done with it in the SSP.
Yeah.
I hear about, you know, well, the ETs should do this and the ETs should do that. Why? We're a child race, first of all. We're in a galactic protectorate because we're a child race. And when every time we get off Earth, we go through and enslave other races and turn them into, well, my faction is turning them into cyborgs and selling them to other ETs. So we're not only being bad ourselves, but we're contaminating other races with the
A mind
same.
virus. It's a mind virus pandemic.
Exactly. That's what we are in space. Now, how does that mean I hate humans? I don't. We're just like 2 or 3-year-olds. That's all. Given enough time, we'll grow up, we'll improve, we'll be better. But we're at a stage right now that we have enough technology that we're killing ourselves. The evidence is that the current pandemic was bioengineered. That means our people did it to us, whether accidentally or on purpose. So
yeah, and then that's kind of where people stop. They don't think about, there's another part of that, is you don't get a pandemic with just the virus if you don't have a system of health caring and giving a crap care. If you don't have a system of where it helps people with poverty, if you don't have that built in to make sure people have access to healthcare and have good food to eat and no toxins in the air. I mean, there's another aspect. You get the pandemic when you've taxed the carrying capacity of bodies, because you make money off that by making sure people are enslaved and poor and sick and ill and toxified. You know,
the folks who think they are smarter than the average, the folks who have been running the show for a while, are the folks who are responsible for the poison in the soil and the air and the water and the food and the medicine and my entire lifetime they've been bitching about that there are too many of us and how they want to reduce the population by 80%. And these are the same folks who have the technology to bioengineer the virus after they've done all these other things, and we have survived anyway. And so I'm thinking that it's our own people doing this. All of this crap being done to humanity is being done by humanity. And as long as it's an internal issue, like it appears to be, ETs have no legal standing to come in and do anything about it, because this is a galactic protectorate. The only ones.
It's a similar thing of where people are like, we try to go help a country through the UN or whatever. Even the United States tries to help a country that got hit by some kind of famine or something like that, or even just charity groups. It's like, yeah, but the mitigation ultimately has to be within that country that we're trying to help. Or it's just going to be a chronic situation. And then what you were saying was, cui bono, who benefits by that? Who benefits?
Yeah, who benefits from it? And from what I can tell, the people who are going to benefit are the people who are basically the elites, who consider themselves smarter. They definitely have more resources, and they have the resources to be able to get out of the situation. So how many CEOs have we had resign in the last 2 years, basically knowing this was coming? And where have they gone? I mean, that's the big question. Are they in these deep underground military bases that people are telling me are being exploded? By the way, I haven't seen any proof of that. I have not seen evidence that any of that's happening. Until I see evidence, you know, it's on Earth. You should be able to get evidence. There
We
should
have
be.
a lot of, I just did a talk about the underworld underfoot. So I try to look at all the different types of underground spaces that there are. And that came on a hint, you know, these little phrases drop in and off I go. And one of them is that if we knew how much real estate was underground, the real estate on the surface value would completely disappear, because the amount of underground from antiquity, I mean, this is from way back in the way back, is phenomenally huge, even in the overt literature when you start to look at it. And I was trying to give a sense of how many different types of places there are and how much of it real estate wise. And it really is phenomenal to look at one piece, because typically we find out about underground spaces like on the History Channel, and they go to Cappadocia and they go under, and they'll show just the part that the persecuted church carved out. They're not going to show all the rest of it that's going on and all the interconnectivity between all underground Turkey and the Berbers, and it just went on and on and on and on. And these were living spaces. These were people, 20,000 people could live underground in Cappadocia. So when I ask why, that gets into a whole set of issues. Why on earth did they choose to live that way for how long, and how come there's hardly any artifacts? They didn't just abandon it like some abandoned city. There's hardly no pottery. Now, it could have been a government thing, but there's like no pottery. There's like they were there, they lived there for a while, and they left, and they took their horses and donkeys and kids and cooked pots with them, I guess, as far as I can tell. But
Well,
I mean,
there was a war that was recorded in the Bhagavad Gita.
of course, yeah, that part of it. But it's I think it's older than that. I think some of those kinds of spaces are even older than that narrative as well. And I think
Well,
there's a lot more going on with it. And I don't think it was always humans habitating places. The underground space
I have been told the history of our galaxy by 4 different races now.
Yeah, I've gotten some narratives there too.
The Guardians, who are the military police of the Galactic Authority, have told me that there have been 4 times that they have intervened here because we have escaped Earth, headed into space, done exactly the same thing that we have done this time. We've gone through, become aggressive, captured other races, turned them into property, and sold them. And that they give us about 50 to 100 years to see what we're going to do, and that then they bring us back to Earth, and they give us an opportunity to become a galactic level 0 civilization. And that means we take care of every individual sentient being on the planet. And you know as well as I do that there are 7 sentient races.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's every member of a sentient race has food, clothing, shelter, education, medical care. Period. Regardless of your evaluation of their personal worth.
That's level 0. That's level 0. You can't do that. You're negative.
Okay.
-1, -3. Exactly.
That is level 0. And that every single time Earth humans have chosen to keep pecking order slavery instead.
Yeah.
And that because of that the Guardians have used some cyclic natural disaster to push us back to the Stone Age and make us start over. in the hopes that next time that we'll behave better, that we'll finally learn to value each other. And, you know, the photos you see of the ships coming through the sun, that's the Germans being sent back because they made it the furthest out. But the Guardians are sending all of them back to the solar system. There are too many for them to come back to Earth now. There are over 1 trillion just Germans out there, and they're only one of 6 factions. 6 major factions and thousands of smaller ones. So they're coming back to the solar system. Right now, the Germans are going to Mars, Jupiter, a couple of Saturn's moons, and there's a planet in the Oort cloud. So that's where the Germans are coming. And there's going to be 1 trillion of them or more in the solar system by the end of 20 years from now. Then they're going to be bringing in all of the others. The Germans call them bankers in space. I believe Corey Good calls them ICC. There's 2 mercenary companies, Kruger and Monarch. There's Solar Warden. Didn't make it very far out there, but they think they're big shots in the solar system. And those are the biggies. There's others, but you know those are the big ones. And there's going to be probably 2 trillion extra people in the solar system within 20 to 25 years. And once they're all—
Is this a quarantine effort? Is this a quarantine type effort to put them back in the solar system because they let them go out and it didn't work out real well?
Yes.
Right?
The galaxy is being quarantined of us. It's for their protection, not ours. And once we're
Absolutely.
all back, we will be given this choice, and it will be a one-time vote, and winner takes all. So you look at all these people who are telling us, I don't want to wear a face mask. I don't care. I don't care if the old people die. I think we're better off if the sick people are all dead. If somebody's disabled, I think we should just let them die. How many people have you heard say that in the last year? Those are the people that are going to be voting to go back to the Stone Age. And they're not even going to realize that's what they're doing.
Yeah, I articulated, this was articulated to me in the night I was on Janet Lesson's program not too long ago. The term they gave me was the agreement. It is the agreement to decide to become civilization 0 level because we're in negative number right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you drop 2 negative and you're gone and you'll implode. That's a safety valve for the rest of the galaxy, is that we implode ourselves and don't contaminate elsewhere.
Well,
so that makes a lot.
They've decided that we because we had time travel, at least the German faction did. Some of those colonies are 400 years old.
Oh yeah.
So you've got 400 years of history that they've been looking at and going, well,
not our best years. Not our best years. They weren't great in other times either, but these are really destructive times, man.
People think we're so civilized now, and we're not. We are far more destructive than we were in the Middle Ages. And people look at that and go, oh, how uncivilized, but we're worse.
Oh, yeah.
You know, yeah. And I read an article today about that people who have tested positive for COVID-19 are going to be permanently banned from the American military. And they're using this as an excuse to change the military over to robotics. And the article was very positive about this being an improvement, except that robotics are illegal under the Geneva Convention because you cannot surrender to them. And nobody cares. So what happens whenever they're sending robot soldiers door to door to disarm you?
Right. How do you deal with something that relentlessly pursues you and you have no choice? Like, you tire out, it does not.
Yeah, even if you take out its batteries, it's repairable and you're not.
Well, and this is one of the things that will, because I'm a tech nerd, I'm aware of the fact that right on the heels of it. So backing up to the 2008, I was in the magazine publishing merchandising as a job,
Mm-hmm.
and we had online publications available at that time, but most people were still buying magazines or subscribing to magazines. And at the 2008 financial meltdown, that was a big switch to where everything went online, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so then my job got cut in half because until everyone's finances changed, they basically cut the number even of the number of magazines that they put out because people were not buying them. What they do is they'll buy one and share them, or that sort of thing. But a
Yeah,
lot
I
of people
remember
went online.
Omni disappeared.
Yeah, they went online. And so watching how that process went, we've got technologies kind of in the waiting room, right?
Yeah.
And I followed the Andrew Yang presidential campaign just because he was actually talking about this, because he's actually talked to the tech gurus, every one of which says that's waiting in the wings, automating many jobs. And then the coronavirus is a good excuse to say everywhere in the supply chain where you have a human, you have a breakdown. So when technology has this money that they just got given by the government to invest, and they're not allowed to buy their own stock because they're kind of on the radar for buying their own stock because that's what they did last time. What are they going to invest in? They're going to invest in upgrading technology, and that's going to be AI based. And then where does that leave us? That could be really good or really bad.
And it's looking like
really bad.
Yeah.
I wish it weren't.
A lot of
it have to be that way.
A lot of the technologies that I've been seeing brought out are things that we used every day in the SSP. Because I have alters in both the German faction and in Kruger. Kruger, the humans who are there are so enhanced that they are the model that was used for the Borg.
Right. I was just going to say Borg.
They are, okay, everything that is in the space programs out there, all of the factions are represented in Star Trek.
Oh, yeah. They were revealing it there. They were telling us we're going to do this.
They were telling us
from the beginning.
They are telling us we are doing this. Except that the Federation,
Correct.
Funny, das Bundes is what the Germans call themselves, and that is the Federation. So, but the Federation is Solar Warden. The Vulcans are the officers of the Germans because they're shot up. They drink black goo as part of their religious ceremony. And so they have no emotions. Pure logic, no emotions, smarter than hell, stronger, and basically Vulcans. The Romulans are the rest of the Germans. The Ferengi are the bankers in space. ICC.
Yeah, right.
The Klingons are the Draco. And the Draco do have honor, just like the Klingons. And they do value the Empire, just like the Klingons. And they are aggressive and body, and they don't know.
Probably eat worms.
They
You know,
are, they're carnivorous,
yeah,
and they prefer their food live, just like the
live
Klingon.
worms, just like the Klingons.
They're
And they,
and
well,
the the Draco used to have issues with humans, and they used to eat us. But they found out that at least the Germans are useful, and so they stopped eating the Germans. I don't know. We were more useful alive than as food. So,
there's your agenda is the idea of they're comparing humanity to what's in it for them. How are we useful to them? And going back to the Anunnaki question, is that the
an hour
Anunnaki
and a
also
half later,
we're gonna have to do this more than once. I knew when I talked to Penny Bradley that there's so many octaves to what we're saying, and we have so many comparative similar experiences that we can go deep and wide and tall into so many directions, where any one conversation is definitely the tip of an iceberg,
uh-huh.
absolutely. But since you wanted
we
me to talk about the Anunnaki question, as I unfolded that experience from having first meeting my first an Anunnaki guide while I was singing in something that sounded a heck of a lot like Klingon, was when he came in. And so from him, I learned things. The first thing he said was, "I'm Anunnaki," and I went, "Uh-oh." And then the second thing he said, which, you know, that was just by reputation.
yeah.
The second thing he was is, you will not understand any of us if you don't understand that we're factional, that we're broken up
Uh-huh.
into factions, and that there's part of them that look at humans as kind of pets or tools, and then actually the ones that work with us more directly start to see in us our inner, what we are, you know, more and
Uh-huh.
more. He put it this way: I worked with humans and I used to think of them as pets or tools, and then I saw in them the spark of the divine, and then that intrigued him, and then as he continued to work with um, with them, you know, he began to realize there's something more to us. But there's definitely that the basic two factions is we're Lulu, we're tools, we're gnosive, we're whatever talent we are is like a Swiss Army knife for them to use. The other part that thinks of us as a child race, and that's their dichotomy. That's their, what they haven't settled yet. But where I think the Anunnaki are kind of set apart from maybe other races is how integrated they are in how this planet is run. I know there's a Draco influence and other influences, but when it comes to the banking system and the pyramidic systems that run this place, basically the way I look at it is, oh, hey, we got this planet and we got these Lulus, we're going to develop this thing. We're going to go over here to the software library, the mental software library, and we're going to install an operating system that I call it sort of rice-a-roni in a box operating system from the Orion system, because it's in what it is. And it's basically an operating system. We used to buy our OSs in a box. I just thought of that. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a thought form, algorithmic, mental prison or
Yeah.
mental
That
concentration camp.
that's what they did. Yeah, they installed a concentration camp mentality into us and tried to make it where we would always be compliant and have no will of our own.
Which is not who we are at
No.
our base core of consciousness and who and what we are. And so when you do that, it is equivalent to putting people in constant. We've got them all over the world and all the
Mm-hmm.
dynamics that occur,
Mm-hmm.
but also the when, you know, the watchers are watched. The watchers are watched. Somebody is watching that and going, okay, first of all, you're violating the law to create a hybrid race in the first place. There's several laws on the books not to do that. For
Yes.
this reason, locking a free
Which
consciousness.
is why I'm in prison as a human.
Right. Okay, so those of us have to be in there with it to try to mitigate it, because you can't mitigate it necessarily from the outside or from the top. It has to be mitigated from within if it's going to be at all.
My contacts have said that I am here to fix it from inside as a human because it's violating the prime for them to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah, they can cause the problem. That doesn't mean they can fix it. They're responsible, and they have not been aware that they were responsible, or they've ignored it, just like we've ignored homelessness and child poverty and everything else. They ignored what they were doing, and they got called on the carpet, absolutely. And now it's like, oh, I've got to fix it, but I benefit from it, so how the heck, you know, like you said, how do you do that? So a bunch of us have come here from the inside out. And don't tell me how we even do this, Penny, being poor and sick and female and religiously programmed, and you know, how the hell do we even try to
I think that was just the most incredible hubris to think that one Anunnaki could split into 60 avatars, and that any of those avatars would have the power to do a frigging thing positive.
Well, and also the system treats us like we're a virus. Like we're an and they have antibodies ready to go. And probably the thing I probably think about the most is, how the hell am I here? Not let alone why. How am I not dead multiple times over? Probably because they're bringing me back. They did cross the timeline with me to keep me from dying the last time. So it was because I'm from the timeline where whatever is in the what is it? I'm getting punchy and tired. Mandela effect. I am on the wrong side of every Mandela effect that is known, plus my own. I have my own personal of those.
I'm responsible for some of those.
Well, it's probably a good thing, that because the timeline I was in, I was as a caregiver of many family members, and the ones that passed. I always knew when one was going to pass, and one day I woke up, and it was going to be me. And I was kind of good with it. I'd had a pretty crappy time. I was kind of like, okay, well, that was that. And they brought me over to this one through a very strange set of circumstances. I pinch myself, I'm still here, but I'm pretty much limited in so many ways, just not miserable. I'm limited, but not, you know, not as miserable.
When my 6D self made her appearance, she asked me how many timelines I was in. And I just popped up with 22. And I have no idea how I knew that. And
I don't want to ask. I don't want to ask.
I don't know how I knew. And she says, well, I had been merging timelines for years. And it was like I would sense one of them was destroyed in a nuclear war. So I would merge that one into this one. You know, it was always disasters on the other one, why I would merge it in. And I wasn't aware that was what I was doing, but I was aware I was moving between them because every day was a new adventure. But
my ancestor gave me a sort of a rule of thumb way of looking at it. And he called it the topography of time. So like I kind of explain it to people this way: is you have a Y line, which seems to be your primary consciousness, maybe just here, I don't know what it is. That's like one line highway road, okay? Then you have what I call Y lines. So as you go XY, so you're now XY Cartesian, right? You have lanes of the highway ones. And then, you know, they're not fixed that you can't merge them into you rather than you merging onto another one. It kind of happens different ways. But there's also, it's a 3D one. So it's a Z line. And the Z line is when you can, like the helicopter above the highway, you can see all the lines and the activity that's going on. That's your perspective. That's probably your 6D self or whatever.
Yeah.
That can kind of observe where you need to go. And most of the moves I've had were involuntary because I wasn't aware yet of that.
Well,
But
I would be bounced between two, and then they would merge. And
okay.
I would have memories of both.
Yeah, I've got 4 of those that are
And
super active and a few extra, but the
I
4,
had already
yeah.
done like 10 of those whenever she asked me. And at that point, I still had 22. And she says, well, merge them all into this one.
Ah.
And I did. And at that point, people who were aware identified me as being the cause. And some of them were really pissed because their family members had not made the shift. And they basically called me a murderer, although I wasn't even aware that there had been their family members. And so at that point, I was being told that everything in this universe was being merged into 2 points. That one endpoint was a dead universe, and that the other point was basically a golden age and new life. And that there were only 2 paths to the golden age. And one of them involved humanity revolting against the elite. And that the other one was a disaster that would take out more of the elite than it took us, percentage-wise. So, and that was 2016 that
Yeah,
I try to give the approximate year of when things happened so that you can rate what you were doing then. But I have had so much shit happen in this past decade because.
Oh yeah, me too. Definitely.
2011, I was summoned by the Dweller of Unal, and 2012, I wasn't introduced, but the NSA agent started talking to me a lot. And in 2013, he activated my memories, and then I became lucid 24/7 and no faith, and the memories in this big lump, all in German, and the violent stuff on top. And sorting through that and learning enough German to understand what I was hearing. And meine Deutsche ist sehr schlecht.
Right? You and Brett need to talk. He learned some German. He lived in Germany and married a German woman, was his first wife. Oh man, he went through a lot.
Meine Deutsche ist sehr schlecht. But
it's very uncomfortable having entire memories in it then, right? You'd think you'd get the translator with. You know, they're like the little ear translator they use in Star Trek. We didn't know the universal translator with, right?
Yeah, and then I've got this friend who does magic, and he comes up with this thing. Oh, I'm going to do this ceremony, so you will remember all of the languages that your soul speaks.
How'd that go?
Well, I've been working on my family tree, and I can actually read the source documents no matter what language they're in.
Oh, fascinating.
I can't.
I do okay.
I can't speak it.
Yeah, I can't either. But I understand enough of the cross language now at this point to.
I'm not even understanding just the cross language. I'm understanding.
Oh,
I'm sitting there reading the source documents, and this same guy is telling me that I got to learn Latin, and I finally got bored enough that I ordered books.
Hey, what I did in my quarantine, learn Latin. Oh, well, yeah, they used to teach that here in the United States, and for some reason they stopped. I wonder why. But
they stopped teaching Latin. They stopped teaching foreign languages other than Spanish in my area. They stopped teaching logic. They stopped teaching
rhetoric.
They stopped teaching rhetoric. They stopped teaching two-column proofs in geometry. Anything that required, I think the proper term is rigor. They don't want you to know how to think.
Right.
The core issue was they had raised a generation that became the hippies. And we could think for ourselves, and we were no longer going to tolerate being sent to war. We were not tolerating the businesses. We were fighting the military-industrial complex. And they decided to stop us by using drugs. The CIA actually started the drugs in the hippie movement. I mean, pot may have been a natural, but beyond that, it wasn't. And pot was only a natural because it is what it is, you know. And so the World War II generation decided to take back the country by putting the kids in jail for pot and dumbing down the schools. I graduated high school in '73, and I had logic and rhetoric and German and French, and the other high school taught Latin, and I had physics and trigonometry, and, you know, I was the pet of the chemistry teacher and was allowed in the back room, and I made lots of things I shouldn't have. And when I made it to junior college, I worked for the math physical science department. And so I taught the professor things that he used in class. And one of them was so out of control that they had to evacuate the whole building.
Yikes. You're that kid.
I'm that kid. So you talk about being a nerd. I was the one that boys told me I wasn't a girl, that I was an egghead. So
oh yeah, I did that, but I was running on the technology track because I was able to get into the computers before, you know, anyone really knew what that was about, and that was my major in college. But that knowledge over time was useful to me in this. If I didn't get away with saying this one word in this whole interview, Akasha net. That's what I call it. It's the internet that's out there. It's the internet with all the galactic history. It's the internet. It's got the social media with all the aliens. And I got plugged into that because it's algorithmic. It matches up. Our little baby internet on the planet matches up with that.
I have been blocked from the Akasha.
Ooh, wow. Okay.
Completely. I have learned to bypass it for certain things. You're supposed to be able to go to the Akashic library and get your personal history. I had to find my incarnation tunnel instead.
Yeah, that's mostly what I've done. Well, I know that's the Akasha library system, but the net that I'm talking about is the workaround.
I go into the library and I'm heading through the door and I hurt my nose, and my nose physically hurts because
a glass.
Because they've instantly installed a brick wall. Yeah. As I'm walking through. I'm not allowed in it. And I'm like, okay. But I can go into upper 4D.
Yeah, I think that's what I use when I say Akasha net. It's a network rather than the static library. Just like you go to a physical library, it's so limited. I don't get information there.
I see
unless I'm looking at pictures.
There's gorgeous marble pillars, Greek-looking library, and I go through, and the arch is suddenly a red brick wall, and it's like,
yeah, but okay. But just as the internet has replaced access to most libraries, when I'm talking about Akasha net, I don't mean that room with the stuffy but dusty books. I mean
this is a room of scrolls.
Yeah, right. What I'm talking about is the base information. So one of the things that the internet was to teach us information in its natural habitat is virtual, and then the next level to discern is etheric, and the next level to discern is getting on the social media of said. So that's the contact base. And just like you get a sense of somebody online, same thing.
I go into the ethereal, and I have what on the outside appears to be an asteroid, and there's a single way in, and it's heavily warded, and that's where I hang out, is inside.
Oh, inside an asteroid. I don't know. I'm the Spider Woman. I'm back here running on the connections and the tunnels and the portals and the corridors. That's kind of how it feels for me. There's an archetype in the Native American of the Spider Woman, and that's how I feel. So I'm kind of sitting there. So a spider, if a fly is down that thread, it'll shake that little section. I've had to vacate my webs for a while of that because of where humanity's at. It's too much. But before I built that network, because I needed that access because I was cut off from the normal access, or I'd go into the real library, open a book and laugh because there's just nothing there. It's just some reiterative labyrinth of information they want to play with until we graduate. You got to graduate from that 101 level. We got to graduate from the groups. Level.
I'm learning to read.
I know you're not.
I'm reading the scrolls.
There you go. Right.
When I can get my hands on them. But
yeah. I'm talking to the people who wrote it. Okay, I have a strong history bent, so the one that really is funny is if I hear a historical figure voice, because I cue on voice because I had vision problems when I was young. I can talk to that person a little bit easier. I think the frequency. So anyone in history, all my relatives. When you're talking about genealogy, that's I remember it as the stories of my ancestors, and I've talked to them, and then I went further back and I lliterally found that Anunnaki character was an ancestor. It's kind of funny when you go back in your history and you find out there's aliens back there.
Speaking of, I was contacted by a group, invited to join, and I ultimately failed the blood test because I'm Rh positive. But one of the hoops for this group was to prove that I was descended from Anunnaki. And
Ah.
I went through, and the first time I found Wotan in my family tree, I was like, nah, can't be real. Then, then I found documentation that every king of England has Wotan or Odin,
Mhm.
same being, in their family tree at least one point, all of them. And I
Mhm.
shared that on Facebook, and there was this lady from England who just went absolutely off on me that those people were not related, that there was no way that could be true. And so I showed her the trees, that they were all descended. And she just completely freaked out on me. But every king of England that England has ever had has been descended from Wotan. And I'm descended from more than one
Did
king of England.
that go over our house? Sorry, Jenny. I haven't had a helicopter over my house in years, and I'm talking to you, and a helicopter goes over my house.
I have one every morning about between 2 and 4, usually between 3 and 4, every damn
I
morning.
used to too.
So
I haven't had one in the longest time, and it was like,
you,
and Brett was
you're
outside.
talking to me. You think I'm kidding? This You need to look through the videos
I know
I've
you're
been
not. I
doing.
know it.
There was one where my mic went out during the interview, and the guy ended up talking to himself for the rest of it. I was texting him questions. um, yeah, we've had all kinds of crap.
I know.
So, and I'm not making money off of
We're
these.
the most interesting people.
I'm just putting the information out there, it's going to be out there.
Oh,
And I keep a copy,
funny.
so if YouTube decides to delete it, I can put it up somewhere else. And now my IT partner on my website is taking my podcasts and putting the MP3 version on our website and on, I think he said, Instagram.
Oh, okay.
So, and iTunes. So,
Yeah, cool. You got a good
so
setup there. That sounds good.
I'm like, I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah,
And
that is the way.
he
I've
said,
been.
he said,
Well,
there's
part of
lots
why I'm
of
glad we're
things I can
talking.
do.
Oh, go ahead.
He says, there's lots of things I can do. You have no idea.
Good, good.
So,
Well,
yeah.
that's good because part of why part of how we know each other is because it was on Janet's program and in those circles. That's kind of how I became aware of you through her. Is
Yeah.
that part of why I haven't been on broadcast, and I'm glad we're pre-recording this, is because I literally can't get on hardly without a lot of, depending on what I talk about,
Yeah.
I can't, I have electronic problems, I get kicked off. The air, one time we had a 4-person panel and somebody started talking over the line and we went back over it, and this guy was telling us the timestamp that he was going to intervene, and being kind of rude, and it was pretty bizarre. I'm having weird electronic problems right now, so I guess it's time, letting us know, hey. All right, you can observe and interfere. It's our sovereign will to talk. I just knew.
Yeah, well.
And when I call their attention to it, they usually stop when I call their attention to it. But we're
So
just two interesting people. We're just fascinating.
we're just going all the way around a topic and not really stomping on it. But that's okay.
What did you want to stomp on? There's so many things to stomp on, right?
Um, what I wanted to stomp on, mostly because you were in the same program, but not necessarily working with Michael Lee Hill. And I've already interviewed him, so that's already up there. And I know from the comments that I got, a lot of people thought he was just bullshitting. And so in some ways you can verify, you can externally verify his story. And I would kind of like
Yes,
to
I'd
do
be
that.
glad to. Okay, I'll do that. So I was having contact experiences just prior to meeting AR Borden, and I found an article by AR Borden, and he was talking about something that comes up. So we were talking about tools in the toolbox. One of them he was told, AR Borden was told, is that humans are very linear, one-track thinkers. And the ET's frustration with humanity is we didn't know how to think topologically. So it's the concept of topological thinking. And that was a huge aha for me, because that's what I had been doing already
Okay.
from the get-go. And so I wrote him back, and then I got brought into the Latter-day Life Physics group, which was a forum that a bunch of us were on. And
About
then
what year?
2000 to 11, maybe 12.
Okay.
And then we were asked, Michael Lee Hill and I were asked onto a radio show together. So we were co-hosts with Charlotte, there's a lady named Charlotte in that group, Charlotte One, and ourselves and another person who will remain nameless. But anyway, we did a broadcast together as a panel group. And then after that group broke, that show was different after we weren't on it anymore. I hooked up with Janet and was talking to her, and she knew about the AR Borden material. And so she started asking some of us from the group, and the group kind of morphed. So I think it was a situation where if you felt a frequency like connection to pull you in, okay, and I think it was that AR Borden realized that he needed to be working with stray cat, free range human nocives versus the ones that were in the programs that he had access to. And then he began to just lob us with information, these different files that are in Facebook, the writings of AR Borden, join it, and one of the people will put you in there, and you could go to the file section and read. And that's,
I downloaded all of those while I was
yay!
Short-term member, by the way.
I told everybody to do that because I had already had groups attacked by then. Anomaly, when I was working in the anomaly groups, the Lunar Anomaly Research Society group we had to take it down and rebuild, and that's a whole saga. But I maintained a relationship with Michael, and we've met in person finally at a conference in Albuquerque, and that was really fun with his lovely partner Sarah. And
they are cute together.
Oh gosh, they're so fun and they're so kind, and we had such a good time visiting. But yeah, Michael Hill is the real deal. He has been contacted, and as have I, by various clandestine groups. He's been talked to by Bigelow Aerospace. He was on the UFO thing. They found his blood anomaly. I mean, he's the real deal, and he's an emanation of Enki, and he has that knowledge base that if people want to know about Michael Hill, go see what he says about crop circles. Dang, I love his work on crop circles and discerning the symbols and everything. And he's a musician, so he's extremely tuned to frequency. And this whole thing runs like frequency, just like all our television, all our radio, all our everything is frequency based, and that is the access portal for everything is frequency. So, and then this group was a group that AR Borden put together to try to mitigate the passage of Nibiru into our solar system. And so we had protocols that we used to do that. And one of the things I did during that time was, after we were finished with the procedure, I just kept my access point open, and so I was able to communicate through quite a few beings as a result of that, beyond the ones I already had been. But you know, I think he's an Anunnaki contactee in the 3D physical, which I think is cool. My contact is more, he's right here doing this right now. Okay, shush. Mine is more in the etheric, but very palpable. And at least a couple of occasions, this being protected me from harm, definitely. And so that's kind of our space. And then as a result of tying information together from what we got with AR Borden, plus our contact base, plus just sifting through good sources on the internet, always a challenge.
Always.
I've kind of been able to learn more about what it was that the life physics group was on about, which was idiomaterial physics. So it's the physics of that the covert and clandestine groups are all over this. It's the physics whereby we understand how we do the things that we do in communication and psychic abilities and all of that.
Which,
It puts that component back in.
If I remember at the beginning of this, you said that had been what you were looking for.
Yeah, it validated what I had been receiving, but was a little bit confused about, and it gave some useful terminology. I had my own terminology, and then because that's a thing, you know, I begin to adopt that terminology sometimes to explain it. So an example would be remote viewing. Okay, this is what remote viewing protocols are. Look at the thing, draw the thing, you're done. It's extremely limited by the protocol, you know. But what a gnosive does is not that limitation. A gnosive is going to take their point of view awareness and put themselves in the situation. Sometimes alarming other beings on the other side, but there you are. And it was called extension neurosensing, meaning that you're taking your energy body and putting it in that situation. But go ahead.
Where my faction calls that bilocation.
Yes, I think that's another good word too, because you're there. It's like you're in the room.
You're there. You're just not in a physical body.
Yeah, exactly. And my interactions with many ETs is quite like that too. Yeah. They're bilocating energetically.
That's
in the space.
What I'm getting from most of them. However, the Zha.a.mi have a technology that AR Borden called leaning in.
Okay.
And that, I know they're not
remote influence, right? Remote influencing. So they're going to affect things.
They're using a technology, and it's like they're here but not physical. And you can put your hand right through them, but they're here in every other way. And
and there's another term to use for that I learned from AR Borden, and that is ontoenergetic. And there's a type 1 and there's a type 2. So an ontoenergetic type 1 is basically kind of like a ghost, like you just said, you know, kind of there, but not tangible in any way. The ones that freak everybody out is the tangible ones. That's ontoenergetic type 2, and that's like the invisible man. You can't see him, but he's right there affecting the space. And then a lot of the ones that are that beings that exist that way, and this is something Brett and I have got into quite a bit, have to have some way to, like the invisible man, wrap himself in bandages and wear a trench coat and a hat, right? They kind of have to do the same type of thing. So get this, that is what a black-eyed kid is. They're not black, it's cavernous. There's no light from within the shell. Okay. Right?
Now,
so that covers a lot of spectrum.
Nangishita is the one that uses the leaning in tech. And when he's here, normally he's like he's here, but you can put your hand through him. But there are times that he's here and he can touch me and I feel it.
Yeah,
And
that happens.
so he's fully visible, and I can feel when he touches me, but he's not actually really here.
Let me tell you of another option with the type 2 situation. So this is a historical reference. So if you see a clown or a costumed figure in folklore, so somebody wearing a costume that fully covers them head to toe, okay? And you think of not a clown, like, I mean, not just like the silly ones in the circus. We're talking the Harlequin type clowns. Whenever a society has a festival, that is the opportunity for one of those beings to don the outfit, and if it's done right, they're covered head to toes, and they have some kind of mask that you can't see the eyes of, and then they come and they interact with us. And another way that goes is they used to visit the courts of England and France, where all the people, like Queen Elizabeth I, used to wear head to toe makeup, really thick white makeup, and they had the powdered faces and the white makeup and the gloves, and they were covered head to toe. That allowed those beings to come and interact. It's mind-boggling, man. So that's what I learned from.
Yeah, that was the time frame when John Dee was interacting with Enochians.
Right, right. There were obviously beings like that in the court, or visiting the courts. Yeah, and that's where he was getting all the information from, because they are very knowledgeable beings. Sometimes they're very immortal, and they will inform. I mean, they'll give you their take on things. They do often have an agenda as well.
Everybody has an agenda.
No, I know. We have our point of view, absolutely, and you need to know that about yourself. And I've tried to make myself aware of my own operating system, you know, how I operate.
At this point, my personal operating system is for the ongoing survival of humanity and hoping to accomplish some semblance of freedom in the near future. That's
ambitious. That is really ambitious.
That is my personal goal set.
Penny, you'd be glad to know I still have the to-do list that you gave me at Contact in the Desert. I still have your to-do list, and I loved it because it's showing how deep dive you are with your intention, right?
Yeah, that's my marching orders, is the to-do list. And I still have the device that went with it, yes. And
that's great.
No, I don't want to talk about that publicly. That will get me in deep shit.
No, I won't say what was on it, but I think the overall intention of what you just said is real.
Yeah.
You know, it's a commitment. It's the agreement and the commitment from the agreement to bring humanity into a different space. You've made that agreement.
I've made that agreement. I've made that commitment to do that. And it's 3.5 years since I made that commitment. And I'm still hanging in there. And
I know.
I've been working on it. And yeah, I've had a few people try to get into my head to figure out just what I am and what I'm doing. And
could they really? If they don't know your heart and they don't know your intention and they don't have any of that inside them, how could they get in there? They can't resonate. They can't find it. They can't see it.
There have been a couple that were close, and I have taken efforts to block them because I've only talked about that to a handful of people that I felt safe around, and even so, half of them attacked me over it. So
if you're getting flack, you're on track, girl. If you're getting flack, you're on track. I know
Oh, well,
that. That's what
I've
I've
been
learned.
getting a lot of flack, so I must be doing something right.
You shared some with me, so I had a helicopter go by. That was really funny. I go, is that a helicopter? I'm doing this, you know. I was like, oh, crap.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, we know
But, you
that.
know, here's the thing.
Now
I
you've got
know.
me embarrassed and flabbergasted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I did not mean it. I did not mean it. I
It's
apologize.
just
But
because it's going out to the public.
I'm sorry about that. If you need to cut that part, you can cut that part.
No, I'll leave it and let them wonder. Let them wonder
But,
what Penny is.
well, if they know you are anything, Penny, they know it's by your intention. What's your intention? And it may manifest in other people in different ways. And your intention is completely who you are. You're made up of your intention, and
My
it is for
intention
humanity.
is for humanity to survive and thrive and get as much freedom as possible during my lifetime.
Yep, I'm with you on that. And I don't even know how that happens, except for the one thing I can always do is I can always work in it in and out of the zeitgeist, in and out of the communication space. But of late, it seems like it's two things, working in the etheric far more. So I'm doing a lot of communicating about humans to the non-humans. I'm talking to them about things I've observed. And then the other part of that is waiting. And I hate that because I'm like, I just had a birthday. You know, I'm going, how long am I going to have to wait? But it's like they have been telling me that there's a transitional thing going on. And
I'm the
to wait,
transitional thing.
good. Well, we need people working in that, and at a certain point in the transition, then this information that I have not only makes sense, but could be actionable and useful. Right now, I
Okay.
feel like a butterfly. Here's what I feel like: a butterfly collector in Berlin, a rare butterfly collector in Berlin just before World War II. Did it matter that you collected butterflies? Because your whole society changed, things got really gnarly, and what is that little thing that you dug down into and you were like so uh, obsessed with? Is almost like it doesn't feel like it doesn't matter, you know. And yet that's part of another part of humanity is the people who observe and try to understand and try to be a scientist, a mystic scientist. That's the term. That's like the highest thing you could be called by AR Borden is a mystic scientist in year one. It's not just that you have the science mind, but you use the mystical bent, psychic bent and you put the two toolboxes together, I guess.
Yeah,
Whereas so many people have it very separate, very separate.
I had to put the two together
Me too.
because neither one answered questions separately. But when you merge the two, it does. And I've tried really, really hard to keep my public testimony 3D rational. But doing these podcasts, my mystic side has been creeping out.
Well, and
And
that's why you get the flack, and I get the flack of where's your sources? How do you know that? Who do you think you are? You know, because they don't understand that we're plugged into sources of information that, by the way, is available to a lot more people. They need to get some mental discipline
they're
and some
hearing it all.
rigor.
They're hearing it all the time. They just think it's their own mind's chatter. Or people are hearing V2K and
Wow.
it's louder. And I keep trying. Well, I have my cap that I don't wear it on camera because I think it looks dorky.
Okay.
It's too big for me, but it works really well. It's nylon embedded with ground nickel, and it's
Interesting.
it's an EMF blocker. It's like wearing a Faraday cage. And so it stops all Wi-Fi, including V2K. I was subjected to V2K from 1981 until 2016 when I bought that thing. And when I put it on, it was instant zen quiet.
Oh, nice.
With shipping and handling and everything, it cost me about $50, and it was worth every cent.
Nice.
And I had been listening to 24/7, being told that I was stupid, fat, ugly, and that nobody could love me from 1981 until 2016.
Oh, wow. Yep, right. I've had that same. Well, here's one of the
And
ways it manifested.
this stopped it. And I've been trying to get people to just buy one. Or the same company sells one that looks like a ball cap. Comes in, I think, 4 different colors. You know, $25 plus shipping and handling. You can have something that will protect you from V2K, and you can think your own thoughts in your own head without the CIA's computer-generated bullshit. It's worth every cent. And then if it's actual telepathy, it will still get through. If you are actually channeling from an ET, it will still get through.
Oh, nice.
It just stops the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
So I've tried to get friends of mine who are channelers to wear one while they're channeling, just to make sure that they're hearing who they think they're hearing. And it's, well, I can tell the difference. Well, I couldn't. So
make it easy.
Make it easy. I couldn't tell the difference. I don't believe you can tell the difference. Wear a cap. Then I'll listen to you. Until you wear a cap, I'm not listening to it because I'm tired of the CIA. And yes, they are doing this worldwide. There are millions of people all over the world. And hearing voices does not mean you're schizophrenic. It means that you're hearing V2K.
I want to go through that just to say that I put myself in a process, and it's not fun and it's difficult to have a set of tools to parse out. And it's more based on the algorithmic language set. And what I would say is that the nuance there is whether you listen for the words of hierarchicalness, because the other thing they do is they reinforce hierarchical type messages. Mm-hmm. So if they'll use hierarchical language. So for instance, if you're channeling and the person you talk to starts with the My Little Children thing, I'm like on alert. Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's infantilizing humans. Mm-hmm. and benevolent beings treat you almost at an equal level of your sovereignty as a sentient being.
Yes, they do.
That's a big one.
That's a major big one. The real ones out there that are benevolent, they treat you like you're an equal, even if you're not.
Absolutely. In fact, actually, in my early days, I was noticing how they treated me the way I didn't even treat myself.
Yeah.
Because I had so much layers of programming. I had to work through all those layers to where I was the person that they expected to be. They wanted me to be. Mm-hmm. And so that is a discernment too, is that they're going to treat, because you are an I am awareness and you are incarnating on a really tough planet and you deserve some kudos for even being here at all, right?
Mm-hmm. And surviving.
But if your programming takes you in that hierarchical language, and that can mean you think more highly of yourself, like there's a ladder, you think either too high or too low, but there isn't a ladder in the good space you want to be in. There's a plane, it's not a ladder, it's equal footing. And so
Yes.
I've tried to develop a discernment along those lines because I wanted to discern the signals myself, which maybe I give myself a headache by not doing what you did, but that's kind of my choice to do it that way, but also to be taking off the wow goggles of, ooh, I'm talking to an ET, woo, cool. You
Yeah.
know,
It's interesting though, you talk about that plane where we're all on one footing in reality. That's objective truth. And yet when you're interacting with humans, you have to figure out where you are on that hierarchical ladder, because if you step one or two higher or lower, they let you know in a hurry.
that's because we're very, very hierarchical conscious in this
That
particular
that
civilization.
hierarchical stuff, that's pecking order slavery.
Yes, absolutely.
If we were doing it right, we would all be on that plane together.
Yes, and also the problems that we have would be very different kinds of problems
Yeah,
because it creates its own set of problems. Just having that type of pyramidic type system, it's unnatural. The natural is
very,
balance.
very unnatural. But the unnatural pyramiding process, the ladder hierarchy, what it does is put too much pressure on those at the top and not enough benefit at those at the bottom.
Yes, and it does.
Because,
They think it's stable, but it isn't stable.
no,
You've got gold at the top and straw holding it all up at the bottom, and now we're having an actual visualization. I mean, the virus is like throwing a light on the structural integrity issues. How
the, the, the virus is attacking the straw bases. And if they're not real careful, they're going to end up with the whole pyramid collapsing.
yeah, and I kind of welcome it because it's not even natural to how humans really are. If we are tribal, so if we're tribal, one of the things that happened when the Romans attacked the Celts, okay, was they said, we have captured chieftain so-and-so, and he's the king of the whatever tribe. Well, no, he was something that Brett told me the term for. It's called Dagda. He was the grandfather. He was the father. He was the one who made sure everybody was okay, not the person who was the big honcho. Different mindset.
Completely different mindset. Yes, tribal is different. Everybody in a well, that was why so many of the Irish and Scots all were so comfortable intermarrying with the Native Americans, is because they had the same tribal structure. The clans were very similar to the tribes in that you didn't have royals. You didn't have a head of the clan. You had
Well, you did.
you did, but they were more they were more the people who rose to leadership because they were good, because they were wise, because they were effective. And everybody had a place in society, even the village idiot. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they had a function. And, you know, nobody was considered useless. And, you know, we don't have that security anymore of knowing our place. Um, and I'm
But
not meaning
not in a
not in a
hypopotent way.
hierarchical sense, but
Right.
knowing our place, that we belong, and that we're going to be accepted, that we're part of this family, part of this village, part of this clan. You know, you don't have that in current day America. Not once you get out of high school, at least. you
Not
know.
really, because we were like, we're made into little units to plug into the corporate world or whatever, you know.
Yeah,
And
we're
now now they want to replace the units with actual mechanical units, you know.
yeah,
And then what are, you know, and like I said, it can go very good or very bad at that point. It can be, oh, we don't need these excess human units because they break down all the time, or this is an aid and a time for humanity to be free from the drudge part and the danger part of work, and
well,
to be able to self-actualize in some way.
and then you have the folks who are perfectly happy working with their hands and creating
Yes.
things, and they're going to be replaced by machines. I
Yeah.
mean, I grew up on a dairy. There is a dignity to work
Hmm.
that I'm disabled now, and I really miss that dignity of work, knowing that I contributed to,
Hmm.
because on the dairy, the animals came first. You fed them, you milked the cows, you fed the animals, you made sure that things were clean, and there was a rhythm to life, a dignity to it. This was it felt natural. Yeah, it was physically hard. It was physically demanding, but even the rigor of it was rewarding. Um, that's something I think a lot of people today have too much stress and not enough rigor. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and when it's knowing your place, you know, that I have a feeling about that because yeah, I went to Harding University, which is the other one of the other ones, and it was like you need to know your place, and I was like you know, because I've struggled with who. It's not knowing your place like in a hierarchical sense. It's knowing where and how you can contribute. How can
Yeah,
you help
yeah.
people
I
and help
couldn't think of
your
the right
tribe, I
term.
guess. No, yeah, I know what you're
I
saying. I know
know
what you
in
meant.
tribes there was a lot of in native tribes there was a lot of assigned roles.
Hmm.
So you didn't always get to follow your talent, or what is it they call it? Follow your passion. You didn't always get to do that because you were supposed to do such and such. But at the same time, you knew your function in the society, and that if you didn't do it, nobody else was gonna.
Hmm.
And it sounds weird, but that can be really rewarding, knowing that, it may not be what you always like to do, but people are counting on you doing it.
Yeah, I've gone back to a skill here in this coronavirus season. I've gotten back to a skill that I learned, and I'm sewing masks, and I'm sewing zero. All of a sudden, sewing is a thing, you know, and I've done it
That's
for
because
years.
people are home.
Well, right, and they want to learn how to bake bread, and they want to learn how to sew. So that's what Brett and I've been doing forever. Is he's a cook, he's a chef, he does, and he's a gardener. You know, so that's what we're doing. And I'm doing organizing stuff and zero. I'm going towards zero waste, so trying to not to have the toilet paper and the paper towels and the So that's my commitment, as well as trying to help caregivers. I'm making masks specifically for caregivers because when the person is stabilized, they send them home and someone's taking care of them. And that is an
Mhm.
invisible army of people, mostly
Yeah.
women. And they're going to be a little bit lower on the totem pole to be provisioned in our society. And that really bothers me because I was a caregiver. My daughter took care of my daughter 20 years, disabled, and I've got a heart for that. And this is like a big load on home-based people or people that now have to stay home because the kids are home. And it's like the financials are all sketchy, you know. So how do we live? And
Yeah.
we're having to go back, not even to our grandparents. My grandmother was a army sergeant in the Women's Army Corps. We have to go back to the great grandparents to be reminded of those skills, you know. But my grandmother did so. Sergeant Josephine, Sergeant Josephine, Rio Josephine.
I used to
You know,
sew
Patrick.
all of my kids' clothes until
Mhm.
they got to junior high, and suddenly labels.
Oh yeah, they don't want you to.
Labels
Yeah,
mattered.
that was kind of.
It
Yeah.
was something that came out in the 80s and 90s that was supposed to separate us from those skills. But I had
Oh, there's a lot of that. Yeah.
I had a garden, and I used to can and freeze everything out of it. And the last big garden I had, I was feeding 5 families out of it, and still filled a freezer and a whole section of canned goods. And I've been in an apartment now for 15 years, and I don't have any dirt that's mine.
Yeah, no.
And
Right.
it's like I've got a pot with onions, and another pot that has parsley and cilantro, and we
It's
have
a
another
start of
pot that
something.
has three baby tomato plants. They're like an inch
Hey.
tall. It's still cold here at night, so we're putting plastic over it so they don't freeze, and that's the best we can do because they don't make hot caps anymore.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Um, there's
We're talking about that too, of trying to make a greenhouse boxes, because not only do we have weather, we had our almost ready to harvest garden a couple of years ago hit by a gnarly hailstorm. It was just took everything out except greens, because they might get knocked to the ground. So we planted a lot more greens this year. And then we're trying to make, but we're in the desert in New Mexico,
yeah.
so we have deer and quail and lizards and rabbits and javelinas, little pigs, all trying. The pigs decimated our potato crop a couple of years ago, trying to eat everything we have. So we've got to protect it, you know. So that's our strategy to
Well,
try to
I'm
expand our
in the
capacity on
Sierra
it.
Nevada of California, and
Yeah, you're kind of.
we have deer and mountain lions that go after the deer, and we have coyotes and rattlesnakes and rabbits and voles. And
Oh,
where I live right now, I live in a townhouse, and my patio is completely tiled and covered with Lou's tools because he's the apartment manager. So
yeah.
the landlady pays for the water, and she just raised the rent because with California's water rationing rules, she's paying $1,000 a month for water for these.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we have this law that goes into effect, I believe, next year, where you're only allowed 50 gallons of water per person per day. Yeah.
You
And
guys are becoming the Fremen from Dune. You're becoming the Fremen from Dune.
what I've put together from looking at the various UN agendas and the various treaties that are out, I'm figuring that where I live is on a list of places that are going to become no human zones. I've seen a map from the 1990s of biological reserves, and where I live is in one of them, one of the red zones. And I'm noticing lots of mostly small fires, but some of them have been quite large, ringing where I live, all the way around it over the last 3 or 4 years. And so I'm just sort of keeping an eye on it. There are laws that whenever that the landowners can't get insurance, that they have to stop renting them. And my landlady is having trouble getting insurance for fires because we've been circled by fires.
There's a lot of fires on the West Coast. I'm from Washington and Oregon, and you know, I have a lot of family and contacts back there, and the fires have been really off the hook all up and down the West Coast, but mostly Oregon and California.
They're not even fighting them unless the house has 50-foot defensible clearing. They're just letting it go.
Yeah. Well, it's a form of triage, isn't it? It's property triage, basically, like we're having triage of equipment and here in the pandemic, you know, same thing.
Yeah, it's housing triage. If you can't get it together to have the legal required clearance is 20 feet. But if you don't have 50 feet clearance, they're not going to waste it. They're not going to risk their lives to save it. They figure you don't care about it. Why should they? And a lot of the older people have been in those homes their whole lives or close to it. And they're just not physically up to doing that. So they're going through and evacuating people, and then the people are losing everything. And they don't let them take their pets with them. So they're coming back. They're coming back and they're looking for their pets, not understanding that they died. And in some neighborhoods, they're not even letting anyone in because they're pretty sure people died in the homes. So they're not allowing anyone in to even search through to see what's salvageable. It's like once there's 2 fires in a region, they don't allow you to rebuild. So it's obvious, if you're paying attention, that they're clearing areas of people, and they don't care if they kill you in the process. So after watching that in California for the last decade, you know, watching the same thing happen with worldwide with a virus. I mean, it's not like they haven't been telling us for a while that they're trying to do that. So I am very thankful that the death rates are well below what was predicted. So
it's hard to be as aware as we are. This is a constant conversation that Brett and I have, is our awareness of things. That's one of the difficulties to get through as well, because it's not just a particular event, it's connectivity with other things. A number of years ago, Brett and I did a cross-country trip, and
there's a whole net of things going on at the same time, and watching them, you can't help but understand that they have been planned for decades, if not centuries.
Well, this is out of the playbook that they've done already. So we were talking about being Irish. There's some indication that the Irish potato famine was a form of genocide, because of if you were a family and you had and they know the numbers from after, you know, it's been studied. If you had 11 acres, your family survived, and if you didn't have 11 acres, your family either starved or immigrated. I mean, they've been with biological warfare type things with viruses and everything. Let's talk about the smallpox blankets. Let's talk about the biological warfare, the things that were developed before we had the Geneva Convention. In
Mustard
World War
gas.
World War II, right.
I had a great uncle who spent many years in bed after mustard gas in World War I.
Mm-hmm.
So
I have an uncle
yes,
that was exposed to
knew,
Agent Orange. Yeah, right.
I knew family that served in World War I. Yes, I'm
That's cool.
that old.
Well, Penny, I'll tell you this we can groan together. You don't look that old. That's what people tell me. You don't look that old, you know. So that's my thank you. I try to see it as a compliment, but yeah.
I'm 64.
I will be 60 next year. I just turned 59. So
we've been talking about 3 hours.
We gotta stop. Brett just made coffee. I can smell it across the kitchen from the kitchen.
How about we end now and promise a redux?
We gotta do a couple more of these, definitely.
Sure.
And I'll stay totally on the Borden channel at that point for you, so I can, because there is a lot there that's worthwhile that I learned, and good people, and I don't mind spending more on it. And in relation to the story of the Anunnaki, I think that's a core story of our society and of what's going on. It made a lot of sense to know that story and to see the schizophrenia of them toward us. I think is important to know. It makes a lot of sense, you know.
Yeah. So thank you for coming, and I look forward to our next one.
Thank you, Penny, for having me. I appreciate it.